Hello and welcome to another video from Dazatron's Diorama Llama, and in this video I'm going to repair a vintage Mego Terraphant. So usually the start of the process is to just take your toy, particularly if it's an old toy, as you can see some damage there on some of the stickers, and to just give it a bit of a clean up. So I'm just taking some of these kind of, I think they're just kind of like face pads, just cotton pads. You can see the grime that's come off this toy. A toothbrush is really handy, and a small brush just to kind of get into some of those kind of more awkward areas. And I'm just using soapy water. You don't want to use any kind of chemicals, just in case it kind of reacts to the plastics. So obviously depending on the toy, some are more easier to clean than others. And you can also see on this one here, there's a little bit of damage. Looks like somebody had kind of burnt part of this toy, and there's a bit of damage elsewhere as well, but it's complete. That's the good thing. These are just some of the cotton pads that I use, which you can pick up really cheap. So once you've dried it all off and it's looking a bit more, a bit cleaner, it's in a case of doing whatever you need to do. So you can see here, when I picked this up from eBay, I didn't realise that the neck joint was broken. You couldn't quite tell from the pictures. So this is the repair that I'm trying to make. So these yellow parts here, they're actually from another vintage toy set, which is Britain's Toys Space Sets. Again, there's lots of variations of these, and they have this kind of modular system where you can kind of connect things together. So within a set I picked up a while ago, there was lots of these little kind of yellow kind of adapters, and they're kind of all kind of fitting to one another, and it fits into that hole brilliantly. So it was the perfect fit. This here is actually, it's not a Lego brick, it's a Creo brick. Again, I've got an old Creo set that I don't really use anymore, and so I've just kind of nipped off just kind of two little kind of ball areas, kind of connectors, I suppose, like to act as a ball joint really. And so I've just kind of filed that down using the Dremel, and just use some sprue nippers just to kind of cut off those bits that I don't need. So I'm actually wanting to leave a little bit. If you notice, I haven't kind of filed it right down to the main brick, and that's because inside this head area here, there's actually kind of two slots, if you like, and that's what enables the neck to move up and down. So again, this has worked brilliantly. So inside, this kind of brick part, I just wanted to get rid of there's some extra bits inside. I don't know what you would call that really, but I'm just warm up a knife just on a gas stove. Be very careful obviously when you're doing that. Just heating up a knife, and then I've kind of cut into the plastic, and this enables me then to put this kind of tube in place. So you can see it was a little bit wobbly when I put it in place there, but I'm going to use some milliput just to kind of hold that and make that a bit more of a secure joint. And that would just slot in nicely into some of those kind of gaps. And the great thing about milliput is that it's an adhesive, as well as a kind of a self-hardening clay. So it works really well for these kind of minor repairs. So at the moment, the neck joint doesn't actually move up and down because it's kind of square. So I need to kind of curve the top of this, and that would just enable this kind of part here to kind of slide around inside that kind of square area in the head. Yeah, it is important that you use kind of goggles when you're using a Dremel. So just very carefully, I'm just using that kind of sanding wheel to kind of just curve the edges of both sides. So when I put it back in, it should then enable it to move left to right or up and down. So I'll put that in place, and that's quite a firm fit. So I'm just going to take the tube I used earlier, and you can see then how I can now move that kind of up and down. So it just give me a little bit of articulation there in the head. So that works really well. So now I'm going to drill a hole again using the Dremel. This was a drill bit that came with the set when I ordered it. So I haven't got different size drills, but this works fine. And this will just enable the tube from the head to kind of fit through this neck joint. So it's a little bit small at the moment. So I'm just going to use one of these mini files and just kind of widen that a little bit. Now that tube that goes into the neck joint, that's what enabled the toy to kind of shoot water. So there was a little kind of canister at the back of the original toy, which I've kind of left off the toy because I don't think it looks that great, but I have got it. And you can kind of pump that and that would shoot water out of that tube. So I'm just putting the tube back through this hole here. You can see it's already a little bit kind of dented, I suppose. It's a bit damaged from, again, the previous owner. But I can just slot that through there now. Push that back into place. So it's a little bit tough here where the tube has been damaged. It should still work, but it's just been flattened. So I'm just going to pull that through the hole. And there we go, it's back in place. So just making sure that slots in. Push that through the tube. And just check again, have I got that movement? And there you go. I could still move the head up and down. So I'm quite happy with that. That's working really well at the moment. I just need to make sure that's secure and in place. I guess you could just use super glue for this, but I just wanted to make sure it was a really tight kind of fit. So again, you've seen me use Milliput in other videos, but if you haven't seen me use this before, or you don't know what this material is, it's almost like an epoxy kind of glue where you have to kind of mix two parts, and that creates this kind of reaction, and that gives you this really kind of hard material. So this is the tough bit. The kind of yellow material is much tougher than the terracotta colour, and it's really important that you've got the same size amount just to make sure that it does go off properly. So I'm just checking that those are as equal as I can get them. There's sometimes I do actually use some weighing scales for this, some of those like electronic weighing scales, if you want to be even more precise. So once you've got your pieces, and I only need a small amount, I'm just going to really kind of push that together until it's really mixed. So just by kind of rolling it into your hands, rolling it into a ball, that would just make sure that it's all kind of blended together really well. So once you've done that, I'm now just going to take a few small bits, and I'm just going to push them into those kind of slots, those gaps. So just take a bit of care doing this. Again, you only really need really small amounts to fit into those gaps. Now, I haven't used gloves when mixing that Milliput, and I would advise that you do so, because sometimes you can get a reaction to it. So I'm just using a clay loop tool here, just to pull off any excess Milliput. Make sure all of those gaps are nicely filled. So I'm just pushing that into place. It is quite crumbly, this material, but if you add a little bit of water, you can smooth it out really well. So I will add some water in a moment, but just want to get rid of any excess so it looks a little bit tidier. And this is just it's kind of a rubber tool that you use for shaping clay. In fact, I think it's called a clay shaping tool. I'm just using a little bit of water and this clay shaping tool just to, again, smooth out that surface and make it look as neat as possible. So that's looking pretty smooth now. So like I showed you earlier, again, the previous owner must have had fun playing with this and has ended up burning some of the plastic, and it's kind of bubbled up. So I just want to kind of remove some of that area that looks a little bit untidier, just using a scalpel. Now you might be happy just leaving it on there. I just feel I could smooth that out a little bit. It's still going to look kind of damaged, but I suppose in some ways that would kind of add to the effect. It would kind of give it some kind of battle damage, I guess. So I'm not too worried about it. Again, you could go a little bit further on this and use Milliput again to kind of fill in any gaps, and you could give it a new paint job, but it'd be quite hard to match up the paint to the original colour that's used there. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. So I'm just trying to remove that last little bit. There we go. So you can see that joint works really well. It feels really secure. It still allows me that kind of articulation that I need. So to just kind of paint it up now, because obviously the yellow stands out really really well against the black, and I don't want that. I want it to blend in. So I've just kind of sanded down this little bit of wood here, just so that kind of slots into that tube. And it just means it's going to be easier when I add the enamel paint to the surface. With the neck joint, because you've got this kind of tube that links it all together, I could just pull that down the tube a little bit, and that will stop it from kind of rubbing onto the head piece. So when I add the paint, I'm not going to get any excess paint onto the actual head part. So I tend to use Humbrol paints. So these are Humbrol enamel paints. This is a black gloss. You can see the number just there if you need that. So I'm just going to remove the lid. And it's really, really important when you use these enamel paints. Again, wear gloves if you're worried about getting it onto your skin. It does come off with kind of white spirits pretty easy. I'm just using an old stick here just to kind of give it a really good stir. And that's really important with enamels, is that you really stir them well. I tend to do it for a good couple of minutes. Just try and get into all the corners. And you just tend to get a better finish here. So I'm just using a large flat brush. And because the paint is quite thick, I shouldn't need more than one coat. And although when you paint this on, you can see the brush marks, because the enamel's quite thick, it tends to kind of level itself out over time. So those brush marks that you see when you're first painting it on, they tend to disappear as it dries out. So don't worry too much about that. So I'm just adding a little bit of masking tape to the top of the tube there, which means I can hang that up. So again, it's not going to touch any surface. And I'm just cleaning the brush with some enamel thinners, or you could use white spirits. And there's the head just hanging up there in my little studio space. And yeah, the next day I tend to give it a good 24 hours to dry out, particularly when using gloss enamel. Matte enamel dries much more quickly, but gloss enamel takes a bit more time. And you can see I've got all the articulation there that you would have with the original toy. So the head can move up and down, side to side. And I'm really, really pleased with that. So here's the finished article on display. And this was just really fun to do and really rewarding, actually, to kind of be able to fix an old toy, give it a new lease of life. So just to encourage you, when you're looking for toys, particularly vintage toys, don't be afraid to maybe buy a broken version for a little bit cheaper and have a go at fixing it up yourself. And if you want more tips on how to do that, I would highly recommend Toy Polloi's YouTube channel. So thank you for watching and tune in again soon.